Welcome back to Continuing the Conversation. I'm Clay Smith, and the whole idea here is that we take what you hear on Sunday morning and try to figure out how do you apply it on Monday morning. So we are in a series at Johnson Ferry called Things That Stick, and we're talking about disciple making, and I have two wonderful guests today. So why don't you guys introduce who you are? Let's start right here.
Okay, I'm Christi Hodges, children's minister here at Johnson Ferry.
Okay, and?
Yep, and I'm Logan Grantham. I'm the student pastor here at Johnson Ferry.
Now, you guys are wonderful people who I know would add a lot to this conversation anyway, but you're here for a specific reason, and that is because today we're talking about this idea of parents as disciple makers. Mm-hmm. And that is something that our parents are hearing us say more and more, that parents are to be the primary disciple makers. And I'm sure that is received in many different ways. But you guys are here today because, Christi, you work with our children's ministry. Yeah. Logan, you help and lead our student ministry. And so you both have a unique vantage point in being leaders and working with both parents and children and students. So we look forward to learning from you today. So let's just start with that first idea. We hear this concept of parents as disciple makers. Why are we trying to emphasize that? So why don't we start with you, Christi?
Yeah, because, parents, we only get your children for maybe 3 hours on a Sunday, 2 hours on a Sunday and 1 hour on a Wednesday, so 3 hours a week. And in that time, there's a lot that happens in between coming to church and not being here at church. So parents, you get to pour into your kids and be that disciple maker for them.
Yeah, I remember years ago, someone had this illustration, you've probably seen it, where they have like gumballs. Have
you
seen this?
Yes.
And they had, I don't know how many hours there are in a week, but there was a lot.
Yes.
And it was kind of like, these are how many hours you have in a week or a year. And and the time your kids are at church are minuscule compared to when they're at home and at baseball and school and just, all the stuff we do. So, what about you, Logan? What would you say?
Yeah, I would say, it's a biblical concept. You see that all the way from the Old Testament where God tells them to pass down their faith from generation to generation. And he's specifically talking about parents doing that with children. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a biblical principle that we're trying to do better at as implementing in our church. Yeah. Because ultimately, like Christi said, we have only so many hours that we get, the children and the students of this church. But parents, like God designed the family for a reason. And parents are the ones who he has asked to be the primary disciples of their families. So I'd say, it's great, but it's also a biblical concept of what we're trying to do.
Yeah. And a little different because at a church like Johnson Ferry, like a lot of churches where we try to have engaging ministry environments and activities and programs and things that help students to grow and learn in their faith, it is easy as a parent to outsource all the disciple making to the church instead of using that as a complement to what you're doing at home. And I know that's a big part of why we're emphasizing that as well. Let's just talk about this generation. Yeah. There's a lot of parents that are watching this that look at their kids and the things their kids are facing, and there's a combination of being worried and fearful, and there's some wonderful opportunities for this generation too. But you guys have a unique vantage point. So just talk about, from a children's standpoint, from a student standpoint, what are some of those challenges that you see again and again, particularly here in East Cobb, North Atlanta, with families, with parents, with kids, anywhere in between? You'll start, Logan?
Yeah, I would love to. I think what we see a lot of times in student ministry is parents discipling their students for success. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. We should want our kids to be successful, to have good jobs, and to make it in the world. That's what we're called to do anyways, just prepare them for the next step in their journey. But I would actually say that a lot of times we say parents aren't necessarily discipling their kids, and I think they actually are. I think parents are discipling their kids, but they're discipling their kids in the wrong thing, where the target for them has been, well, if they get into the right college, they get into the right school, then we've made success. That's successful for them. When really what we're trying to tell parents is the main thing that they need to be discipling their kids in is not necessarily where they go to school and what their life will look like one day, but in the ways of Jesus Christ. So I think, sometimes we can say, well, we've got to begin discipling your kids. Well, you already are. Yeah. You're just not discipling them in the ways of Jesus like we would hope. But I think so. I think that's a main thing that we try to really harp in on with a lot of our students. They feel the pressure to be successful and to get into the right school, and we help them see that maybe Jesus has a different plan for their lives, and that's not the bar of success. The bar of success is, building the kingdom of God. So we try to help understand, like, we are. It's like we're playing a soccer game, right? Yeah. And sometimes if we don't have a target, we're like playing a soccer game with no goal in mind. Well, when in reality, what we're trying to do is help parents see the goal behind discipling their kids is following the ways of Jesus. It's not getting into the right college. So I'd say for student ministry, that's a big piece that we see is, just the idolatry, if you will, of success and how it just controls our lives in so many ways.
And easy to do.
It's so easy.
Easy to fall.
Yeah.
I think we all have fallen into it at times. Just kind of adopting priorities that are not the best priorities.
Yeah.
What about with kids? So here we're talking, when we say kids, we generally mean, birth to about 5th grade or so.
Right.
What are some of those unique challenges of that age demographic?
Well, I think some of it's similar to what you just talked about, that success in putting priority on activities and things to do, whether it's sports related or theater, music, whatever it is, or academics become a pressure. We see that at a younger age as well, as a lot of pressure on making those grades and those milestones and all of that. I also think for parents too, a big challenge, but it goes just to what you said, Logan, is that placing that priority and realizing that you already are discipling your children in what you do. And parents, I think the word discipleship and think, oh, that's another thing to add to my list. Yeah. And, oh, I don't know how to do this. Am I qualified to do this? And really, they are. A great example, I read the other day, they were talking about math. Today in school, in elementary, math is math, but I don't know what this new math is. And they come home with this math homework, and you're like, I don't know. 1 + 1 is 2. Why are we doing it this way? I don't understand. Ask your teacher. And I feel like sometimes that's kind of what the idea of discipleship is like. Oh, I don't know what this is. I don't know how to do this. But actually, parents, you really already do. If you pray with your kids, you're already doing that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I would say too, like one of the major challenges that we see, Clay, is that it's hard to keep up with the culture. I mean, it really is. I mean, it's changing so quickly, and there's all this new technology and different things that we as parents and as leaders in our church are trying to understand and try to lead and disciple our kids in the way of Jesus, and still trying to learn about all this new stuff that's being bombarded on our children. And so the tendency, though, is that we either don't address any of it and we just let them go, or we try to isolate them and bring them into our holy huddle. And so then when they do leave us, they're not equipped to be able to live out in the culture because, they've just been in their holy huddle their whole time here at Johnson Ferry. Yeah. So somehow there has to be a balance where we prepare them to understand the culture and understand what Jesus says about certain things that they may struggle with and deal with in their lives, but not completely isolate them from the outside world, because it's going to reach them at some point.
Yeah. And the internet has changed everything.
Yeah.
I mean, that probably goes without saying. So I'm 45, kind of a Gen Xer, older millennial. I don't know where those exactly lie, but I do remember my life before the internet and after the internet. Like I remember being in college, getting a computer, and how different things were after that time. And it's fascinating to me with student ministry that when you go on student trips, mission trips, it's mandatory to turn in your phone. You cannot bring a phone. And they have to go through detox, but they end up loving it, right?
Yeah.
What does that say about just that whole thing?
Well, I think it speaks to the fact that students want to connect with others, but they're given something that they can't necessarily handle. And I'll tell you this, like, it was a reality for me the first time that we ever did that and made that a rule. I made it on myself. Obviously, I had my phone, but I did not take my Apple Watch with me. And the whole week, I had the same watch on, the calculator watch. Nobody has these anymore, right? Yeah. My arm was buzzing the whole time, but my Apple Watch wasn't on. So like it totally messes with you.
Yeah.
It
the ghost
has
ring.
A hold. Yeah. So, I mean, I think, with that, I think it shows students want to be able to connect with other people, and they want to have, good relationships, not superficial, artificial relationships with each other.
And I think a point with that too is parents being that disciple maker. You want your child to come to you first to ask those questions about hard things instead of going to their friends who are on their phones just searching it up. That having your child be able to come to you and ask those questions in a safe way develops that relationship. So when they get to you, Logan, in student ministry, they have that bond and they have that relationship and that trust.
Yeah, and we don't have the option to not address the cultural topics anymore. Whoever is the loudest voice is going to reach them. We have to be louder. And that's really what we want to help our parents, and even me as a young parent, tried to begin to do, is understand the culture and speak louder than the culture.
So talk to parents as practical as it can be. So let's say we have a parent who's watching thinking, I would love to be more influential in my child's life. I understand that they need to know more about the Bible, God, prayer. I just don't know where to begin. I don't know where to start. I feel overwhelmed. I feel not good enough. I feel, all these things. So let's just talk to those parents. Maybe start with you, Christi. What would you say to that parent? How would you encourage them? What advice would you give to them to start?
I would say more than likely most parents are already doing something. Whether you're praying with your child before bedtime, whether you're reading like the storybook Bible when they're really little, which is a great Bible, and then moving into reading scripture with your children. It doesn't have to be a program or a plan. You don't need a book other than the Bible. It's really simple. And just having those conversations with your kid, asking questions, not being afraid to ask questions. Because sometimes I think as a parent, I'm like, oh, if I ask this, I'm not going to know this answer. But that's a great thing, actually. If you don't know the answer to something that your child asks, to be that guide, to show them how to find the answer, is just a joy and a blessing to be able to do that. And helping your children just understand simple things like what that scripture says. Thinking about words in a Bible verse. So, for instance, Sunday we were doing, I'm fearfully, wonderfully made. I'm like, okay, what is fearfully? Does that mean God's afraid of you? And the conversation from that and the kids' answers, it was just fun, engaging, and all of us learned something in that moment. And so for parents, I think just taking that time with your child, asking questions and not being afraid of it.
Yeah, and can I just give parents permission to use a powerful sentence, which is this? I don't know.
Yes, right?
It's okay. So if your child asks you a question, it's okay to say, that's a great question, and I don't really know, but let's try to figure out the answer together.
Right, right.
Yeah, and just having that dialogue.
Yeah.
Logan, what about you? What are some tips, advice, help you give to parents?
Yeah, I would say the first thing that comes to my mind is you can't disciple your kid in something if you haven't been discipled yourself. So I would encourage our parents to try to get in some type of discipling relationship with someone else and begin to disciple your kid out of the overflow of what God is already doing in your heart, and not trying to just, put more things on your calendar with your kid, but using those moments you already do have with intentionality of what God is already doing in your life through your own discipleship process and as people are pouring into your life. So I would say, that's a big one for me. I would also say just some quick practical things. The D6 is the curriculum that we use on Sunday mornings, and I think a big opportunity that is not used enough is is a free app. It's our D6 free app where parents can download it on their phone. They can see exactly the lesson that we cover in students, and I think children's ministry uses it too.
We do in fifth grade, but even a gospel project for the younger kids, we have the same information out there.
So it's just an easy, low-hanging fruit that you can download on your phone. You can have it. They'll send you updates. They also give you all kind of other ideas of family things to do. So I think that is just a great opportunity that could be used for parents. So just leveraging those moments that you already do have and leading and discipling your kids out of the overflow of what God is doing in your life. I would say probably the most impactful moments for me with my father and my mom is not necessarily some lesson they taught me, but it was whenever my dad, when I was serving with him one summer, he got me up in the middle of the night and we went to the hospital together to check on a family in our church that was struggling. Like, I'll never forget that moment. And that moment, my dad had built so much trust in me, or he had built, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I had a lot of trust in him because of that moment.
Sure.
So using experiences like that to teach your children in the ways of Jesus are just really important.
Yeah.
Well, that, and I was thinking those experiences, some of the best conversations I've had with my kids have been in the car.
Yeah.
There's something, I don't know, special about being in the car and them looking out the window and thinking and asking questions and having those conversations.
Yeah.
Well, and even like, if you have a student and they're in middle school or high school, most of the time you ask them a question and they're like, yeah, okay.
Yes.
And like, how do you get past that?
right.
You know, like, how do you get to really intentional conversations? It's hard.
Yeah.
And actually for D Now, we brought in Ashley and Heather Holloman, who did a talk on, how to have beneficial conversations with your kids. And that's a great resource that we could definitely provide for any parents that want to have it. But I would look into them as well, because they have some really good content.
Well, that's a great tip for parents too. This is a skill that can be developed.
Yeah.
So if you feel like you're not very good at it, guess what? No one feels good like they're good at it. But it is a skill that can be developed. Well, I love your heart, Christi, for disciple making with our kids ministry. Logan, I love your heart for disciple making with our student ministry. One thing I love that you both do is you encourage children and students to be discipling their peers and to be taking on leadership roles and responsibilities. And I just love where you're taking this ministry. So our church is blessed to have both of you guys leading this ministry. I know today has been helpful for a lot of parents. So if you're a parent or a spiritual parent, a grandparent, I think there's a role for all of you to learn from this conversation. And we're so grateful that you continue the conversation with us today.